So hello and welcome back to Climbing on Mount Sophia. Today will be a little bit of a new adventure than what I've been doing recently. Recently, I've kind of been working in kind of some of the deeper territory of this little corner of the internet and trying to pull at some of the threads of Christianity and some of the deep stuff, but it's in a specific language frame. And so today is a little bit backing out of that into a little bit of the real world background of my life. Josh Klaasen is a good friend from undergrad. Him and I went to Biola University together. This is the Bible Institute of Los Angeles. We came from, so I'll tell a little bit, Josh, of like where I see our relationship was last we knew each other, and then maybe you can do a little bit of the same, and then we'll go from there. But
Sounds great. Yeah.
you you and I were in the same dorm as freshmen, and I was coming from a like, I thought I was a good athlete like freshman year. Came to find out that wasn't as much the case as I thought it was in college, which was a healthy experience for me, but a difficult one. And but I was very kind of like, you know, in I was very kind of like, I don't know, I don't even know what I was. I was kind of like sincere about my Christian thing, but it was more, I don't know, it was a little bit too superficial to say it was really sincere. But then from my perspective, you lived in the same dorm as I did on the same floor, and you were not interested in say drinking the Kool-Aid of what was going on. And so we had somewhat of an ambivalent relationship, I think. Um, Although then later on in college, you ended up working a lot with my now wife, girlfriend at the time, so we had some more connection there. But yeah, we really didn't have many deep conversations or anything in college, but we were kind of like around each other a little bit.
That's accurate. Yeah. And I think that, so I remember as a freshman, and you know this, when you go to Biola University, you need to sign a contract that basically excludes you from drinking, from having sex, from doing a lot of like, they don't say no swearing, but if you swear on campus, you get nasty looks and you do get called to the office sometimes, which I have gotten called to. I was called to that office numerous times for swearing. But I was drinking a lot in those dorms with me and my roommate and I, we were drinking a lot. And you were friends with the RA in that clique. And
Yeah.
so with all that clique in general, I couldn't really be seen so much around those people because I was drinking all the time. And I didn't want to like say things that would make it known that I'm on the sauce right now.
Yeah.
Um, but what I got from you, so I couldn't figure you out. That's the thing. And that's probably why we didn't have as many deep conversations, because I saw a sincere spiritual person who, a very good guy, who's trying to live life like the best way possible. And you were doing everything you could in the Christian sphere to do that, but like I didn't know if I could trust you, because at Biola, you don't know if you can trust anyone. Because like some person, and this is my issue with a lot of Christians too, like you'll think you're best friends, and it's like I just got called to the RD's office. You're the only
Mm-hmm.
person I told. Well, F you, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then when you married Elise, it's funny. I was disappointed that we didn't know each other better after you married Elise because I started seeing all like your naturistic Instagram exploring adventures, and I'm like, these are two people who like are like they're exploring other areas of consciousness, they're
Mm-hmm.
expanding, they're looking for other things. And so I'm glad we're talking now because we haven't spoken in probably several years, but I'm glad we're finally circling back around to this because it sounds like we're both searching for, I guess we're trying to expand our consciousness, it sounds like, in ways that we were not taught growing up.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And what led into this conversation was you've been making, well, you've had some really interesting experiences, I think, since we graduated college, but you've been making a few videos that you've been putting on your Instagram and I think maybe YouTube as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I started putting them on YouTube again. I got to get that train rolling once more, but it's mainly been Instagram just to start writing again, you know?
Yeah. And maybe as an aside, you could say a little bit about that. That's kind of the whole world that you work in is video and everything. Before I go further here.
Yeah. My main career, passion, love, it's filmmaking. I spent the past year and a half working on a documentary. This wild, eccentric, original artist, photographer living in the Hollywood Hills. I was doing real estate videos as, a cash flow thing for my production company. This wild British dude lived in this 8-level mansion in the Hollywood Hills. Narcissist. He wanted a documentary about himself. He asked me to make it, so I moved in, started making it. It's a very, I don't know if you watch Nathan For You, but it's kind of like that. It's nearly finished. The long form version is nearly finished, but I made it Nathan For You style. It's like we're exposing the truth about this man, but there was a lot of artistic underlying spiritual elements to it as well.
Yeah, I
Um,
really noticed that even just watching your trailers. Like that's when I started to kind of because I mean, we hadn't talked in a long time. I don't have Instagram, but like my wife started showing me these videos you're putting out, and I was like, oh man, there's some symbolism. There's some things that he's playing with in this documentary that are really interesting. And that's when kind of this whole conversation kind of started to come about in my mind. I was like, oh, I want to talk to him. Like he's playing with some really interesting territory.
And I'm so glad you said that because I made this film for people like you who are looking for the symbols in that way. I'm for people who are artistically elevated, who want more out of the content they've been consuming, and who are looking for the spiritual parallels to cinematic stories. So that makes me feel really, really good. Someone gets it, and you're the audience. So that's great.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. I mean, so I don't know if have you ever heard of someone named Jonathan Pageau?
I have not. No.
Okay. Okay. I'll send you some of his stuff. He's someone who, as I referred to, this little corner of the internet. He's kind of one of the heavy hitters or larger figures in it. But he has a I don't know if it's a website and it's his channel on YouTube and everything. It's called The Symbolic World, and he's an Orthodox icon carver who has spent a lot of time. He kind of grew up evangelical and then became an Orthodox, a Christian Orthodox, and he's an artist, and he spent a lot of time just trying to start to understand the world in kind of a different way than we're all used to.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's made a lot of videos. Some of his videos that have gotten the most views are kind of interpretations of modern stories and the modern myths, really, of like Marvel and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So he's the one that probably helped me to get to the place where I could kind of see that kind of thing in art. And I'll send you his stuff because I think you'll find it really interesting. But anyway,
I'd love to.
I think that's recognizing that in you, and then especially then you released this set of videos that I'm going to play right after I say this, but this set of videos of your spiritual journey that you've been on recently. And I'll insert the video here.
Today, we're talking about spirituality, depression, and religion. That's a lot to unpack in one video, so I'll be doing it in 3. This is Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Like many, I grew up in a Christian conservative environment. Jesus was the only God, and side hugs were swiftly enforced. I didn't like school, so I never worked very hard at it. That attitude gave me a very narrow spread of universities that were willing to accept me and my shitty grades. He's on something too. But when you grow up in the Christian culture and you know how to talk the talk, all you really need to get into most Christian universities is a Bible, a testimony, and a GPA north of 2. Having said that, Biola University was the college that accepted me and my version of those things. When you enroll at Biola, they make you sign a contract agreeing to abstain from sex, drugs, and alcohol for the duration of your undergrad experience. This presented a real problem for me because all those things were on my schedule. Biolans are rather rigid in their worldview. I'm more free-flowing and value originality. So right off the bat, my vibe presented a red flag to the established environment. When you tell me I'm a villain without probable cause, you've pissed me off, and I will now become that villain and give you a reason to worry. Penises on dorm room walls. And I wanted nothing to do with religion, and because I wanted nothing to do with religion, I thought I wanted nothing to do with spirituality. But I was wrong. During my Great Depression, I smoked so much weed out of a dirty pipe I was never cleaning. I got pneumonia, but I kept smoking. I'm laying in my bed, high, depressed, with 104 fever. I began hallucinating. I'm laying in my bed, high, depressed, with 104 fever. I began hallucinating.
Oh, hello, Josh Klaasen.
Brilliant, blue, purple, vivid shapes.
Made from flame.
No. And one creepy-looking Rumpelstiltskin motherfucker. I felt like I was on an aggressively bad acid trip. It was the last weekend of January 2017, and I wanted to die. I want these videos to be more about spirituality and not so much mental health. I will say that depression has been an ongoing struggle throughout my life, and it's taken many years and methods to bind it and put it in its place. Back to the timeline. Pneumonia treated, fixed. Depression, I was now aware that it was real, I had it, and I needed to make some lifestyle alterations. The pneumonia, depression, weed fever hallucination was a profoundly spiritual experience. I felt in my soul, more than ever, that there was, in fact, a divine source,
Like the Force.
vibrating through the atmosphere. Behind the veil, but with practice, time, and focus, one could learn to better understand and access this force. But what was this force? Jesus, the universe, a mushroom? I wanted answers. So I began my search and started attending New Age, Buddhist, yogi, meditation-style events, gatherings, and sessions. I also started going to a Los Angeles church and participated in their theological doctrine classes. I learned a great many things and met a great many people in all of the previously mentioned camps. The people you do need to watch out for, however, are the Kool-Aid drinkers. One can spot a Kool-Aid drinker by examining the dilating pupils and hazy gaze of invincibility that becomes the face of every human who's been getting high on bullshit. These people are most prevalent in aggressively charismatic communities, meditation-style gatherings that advertise for self-empowerment, and in extreme cases, cults. Was Jesus just a cult leader whose followers didn't want to come to terms with his death, so they started a whole religion around it? Or is he the savior of the world who only asks that you believe he is who he says he is? But if you don't, you'll burn for a very, very long time. And he loves you.
You've been on this spiritual journey, and kind of throughout your life. But I'm curious, like, there's a bunch of different things I want to pick up on in it. But like, it's so. You kind of grew up evangelical,
Yeah.
generally, and then it was about the time you got to Biola that you were really just trying to break out at that point.
Correct. And like, it's funny because going to Biola is like not the time to break out in evangelical space, you know. But like, it just kind of played out that way. My childhood was spent in Western Michigan primarily. And that's a pretty Christian conservative area. I mean, the one I was living in, Holland, Michigan, Dutch, Christian Reformed, very stoic, evangelical, but not like charismatic evangelical at all, just like frozen Calvinistic. Then I lived in Washington for a while throughout my high school years. And it was an evangelical church we went to, but it was like pretty charismatic. And so I liked that much more because, I'm naturally a very spiritual person. And so I liked all of that, like flowing with the Holy Spirit, stuff like that. I enjoyed that. But the rules were the same, the legalism was the same. And I just noticed over time the toxicity in particularly the Christian community. And I had gone to a Christian high school also. I was just Christianized out completely, but I wasn't a good student. That's on me. I didn't do school, like I did the bare minimum to get through. And Biola and Vanguard, they had a very low bar for like accepting people. And I finagled some things around, and it was just like the school I could get accepted at and not pay way too much money for, like USC, UCLA, all those, like, no chance. So it just worked out that way. And I got there, and I wasn't around my parents anymore. I had my own identity. Everyone there was like a goody too. Not everyone, you weren't, but like a lot of people, the general public. Like, you see, like you weren't like, I don't think you would have ratted me out for drinking though. You know what I mean? I don't
Oh no, I wasn't that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I more or less followed the rules, but it was just because I was like, it's not worth breaking them. And it wasn't, I wasn't a soldier for maintaining the rules for everyone else. That's for sure.
You were just a straight shooting good guy. You know what I mean? Like that was you, and that's awesome.
That's very kind of you to say. I hope so.
Yes, absolutely. But when you contrast me to like an altar boy type, which is like the archetype of most men at Biola, like I'm going to go the exact opposite because I'm a person who stands out, and that's like just part of my, I guess, artistic experience and how I like live life, So I'm like, I'm going to be the villain of this school. Okay. I don't like any of these people. I don't like the culture. I'm going to F some things up. You know what I mean?
I mean, you played the part nicely.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
I don't know how many days I didn't see you wearing black.
Right. I wear black a lot. Yeah. Well, like black is it's a very energy.
There was something so wonderful about when you were there at Biola, and like you did these things, and like there was no mistaking the fact that you weren't bought into, say, the mainstream crowd, but you weren't like, you were so disarming about it though, because you had like the FU vibe, but you were still like smile and laugh and hang out with, like, it was funny. And I, like, looking back on it, it was very kind of wonderful because you would, you'd do these things. You were on the school like news program, like senior year with Elise. You did the school, like, whatever, Eagle Vision or whatever that was.
Eagle Vision, yeah.
And it's like you're on these episodes that the school is like posting, and you're just kind of like F everything, like not caring. I won't put this on you, but I wonder if it's possible you may have not drunk before some of them, and just because you're just hanging out. Maybe that's just you. I don't want to put that on you. It's like, it was wonderful because it's like you couldn't really get upset with you, at least from my standpoint. But it was also like, no, I'm not doing your thing.
That is my attitude in life. So I appreciate that you noticed that, because I'd say that's accurate. Like when it comes to, because we'll go to the Bible. The Bible says, we don't fight with like flesh and blood. We fight with strength and principalities.
Yeah.
And you find verses like that across almost all religions, all spiritual paths. Like you're not fighting against your fellow man. You're fighting against a concept or a thought form that is like possessing that person. And thought forms, we're all possessed by something, because we're all just energy fields. And so my attitude was always like, I hate what you stand for right now, but like, I like you. I don't not like anyone. Like, it's very hard for me to not like a person. And so I think that translates into conversations also. And I always want to learn more things. So if you come to me with an attitude of like, where our opinions are different, but let's talk about this and both find the truth together, then I'm happy as a clam and I'll have that conversation. Yeah. But I get feisty with the people who try to control me. Like some of the people there did get a little like feisty and controlling with me. and I snapped back. I don't know if you heard those stories, but those were few and far between. For the most part, I'm an easygoing person to be around.
Yeah, okay. So there's a bunch of things there, but like the kinds of things you're talking about of being possessed by ideas, by thought forms, by ideologies or families of ideas, there's all kinds of different layers at which you can pick that out, right? And I think that's were you kind of conscious of it, like in a self-aware way, as you just described when you were at Biola?
Yeah, from a very early age, I've been reading a lot of, I read a lot of law of attraction books
Okay.
starting when I was like maybe like 12 years old. My
Okay.
dad was a traveling salesman. And so he went to a lot of those like self-help seminars, bought a lot of the books, the courses on like how to communicate, raise your vibration to be a stronger presenter. So I was very conscious of that element from a young age, and I've always carried that with me. And I'm a big believer in like, you know, sound. I love sound and working with sound in cinema. And I was always very conscious about what I said and the words I use and how I would say things. Like it's very hard to find me on a day when I will negatively say something about my day or like myself or someone I care about, because I just believe even if you say it and don't really mean it, like you just put sound vibrations into the ether and that's doing something, whether it does just moves the scale, whatever, like it does something, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so this is something that I've like talked about a lot in different ways, but I like the way you're coming at it, is this notion of everything you say and every action that you take, top to bottom, matters. And it seems to me the case, like you're what I'm hearing from you there is kind of an argument from a perspective. It's kind of that like that border of kind of spirituality and quantum physics almost is where you're talking about it there, which is what I love.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I'm coming at it from the side, like there's two other lenses I'll layer on what you just said. One is cognitive science, right? And the actual way in which our cognition works. I find that when I'm careful about the words I use, and I only use the right words, right? I don't just use them sloppily, and I don't use them frivolously. It maintains the words can maintain in more stable relationships to each other, and my own cognitive mapping of the world becomes more clear.
Yeah.
Right? Like I can stand on this word and it doesn't move because I never misuse it. And I think that then you can scale from there to the Christian frame, which the Christian frame has all these things about like, you know, the life and death is in the power of the tongue. And there's a huge emphasis on the words you speak, which is, I don't know, words are kind of like midway in between action and thought. They're like the I don't know, the layer between in terms of our actual embodiment into the world. And so I think oftentimes, I mean, the thing that gets emphasized always everywhere in the world is the focus on the actions. Control your actions, do good actions, right? But like Jesus' Sermon on the Mount is being like, hey, you guys are being kind of dumb because you're playing at this level, but you need to play, if you play at the level of the thoughts, then you don't even need to worry about the actions. Like they're downstream.
Right.
You know, but I don't think, I guess what I'm saying here is like, this is the level between those of the words. And like, you're trying to get every level in order. Okay. So that's a bunch of stuff, but
completely, it's the bridge, you know. You could have like a beautiful mainland and a beautiful island, but if you got a rickety bridge, like it's going to be much harder to get to that place. And I found too that like that's why I try to write for at least 30 minutes to an hour every single day, because if you do that, you're thinking about the specific words you want to use in whatever thought you're communicating on paper, and that gets registered subconsciously. And now you know that word, you're comfortable with it, you know exactly where it stands, and then you're more prepared to use it in your everyday speech. And so 100%, dude, words are very, very important. And I found that exact same thing. Like when you are conscious of the words you use, your actions follow, and you become more conscious about your actions also.
Yes. And they become easier.
Yeah.
So like this is, you know, I guess layer on my story, like one of the things where my story really took off was a guy by the name of Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you know who that is.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Read his book 4 times. Yeah, I like his book. It's good.
Nice. Perfect. I mean, a lot of the things we're talking vector off of points there, right? But I'll bring up one specifically, which is tell the truth or at least don't lie.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, for me growing up and even through college, like the only reason you told the truth really was like, well, other people won't like you if you do it too much.
Mm-hmm.
But the only higher justification I ever heard was like, oh, God doesn't want you to do that. But like, I never understood why. I never understood how much it matters to your actual internal mapping of reality to tell lies. And that was one of the things where it was like this switch of like, oh, this isn't just a game, right? Like I'm not here just to be like, oh, screw the system, I'm just gonna do my thing. It was like, no, man, like this is real, and you're responsible for your own life, and you actually can make it better or worse. Like the ways you live your life, it's not like you're just a victim of a system. Like the things you do have a huge impact on how your life actually goes.
Yes.
But it seems like you learned that way earlier.
I did. And that's why I had a big issue with a lot of the people at Biola and started to have a big issue with a lot of modern day Western Christianity, because you have like it's weird. You have like this group, you have, in my opinion, at least, there's Christians fall on like either side of the fence generally, but you're either like, you get these legalistic, very rigid ones who are like, follow the book, follow the rules, very, very rigid. Then you get the ones who are like, Jesus, grace, it covers all. All I have to do is like go to these services, raise my hands, like just be in the spirit, whatever, and Jesus will take care of the rest of my life. I don't need to do anything. He's in control, you know? And that was my biggest issue, because I'm like, okay, yes, like the overarching process, like divinity, yes, is in control of all of that. But because it's a loving divinity, it gives you free will. And the free will, that's you choosing heaven or hell every single day. And I don't mean that as like you're going to burn or you're going to ascend. I mean that like, okay, are you going to get up at like 6 a.m. and work out and do your day? Or are you going to get up, look at your phone, jerk off, smoke weed? You know what I mean? Like you choose either path, and whichever path you choose, the trajectory of your day and your life will follow. God wants people to take responsibility. I think like he wants you to choose the good thing. And sin's like, it's like naughty. Sin is naughty. That's what was taught to us, you know? But to me, sin means like, okay, it's like you fell short that day. I think I got this from Jordan Peterson. I think it was a YouTube video he was doing. He was talking about how like in one interpretation, sin just means missing the mark, you know?
That's not just one interpretation. That's actually the meaning of the Greek word that gets translated as sin. So it's not even that it's like an alternate translation. It's like, no. Like what we have now has already been tarnished. If you go back to how, like what it actually was, like all of this is illegitimate. It's not like, oh, they're two equally legitimate. It's like, no, this is illegitimate. Garrett, and go ahead.
That's wonderful. That's great. Yeah. And so like knowing that, why aren't Christian teachers, pastors, whatever, like communicating this to kids? It's like, no, there's power in your decisions. Like I was always taught, like no one could tell me why premarital sex was bad. All I knew is that like my sex energy was considered naughty. Okay. But if you read books like Think and Grow Rich, there's an entire chapter dedicated to what's called sexual transmutation. And what that means is your testosterone, your sex drive, whatever that energy is, it's friggin' powerful. It gives you energy, it gives you passion. And so the message should be, you don't need to waste it on people you don't care about. You don't need to waste it on porn. You can keep that inside of you, channel it, and put it into something productive, put it into art, you know? And so I think the message that people are teaching to Christian kids should be more like, like you're fine, but like you can choose these higher things and there's benefits to you in your life, not just you're being naughty, you know?
Yes, yes. Like, oh, yes. And like this is the thing with Christianity, right? This is the thing with modern Christianity. It's so freaking disconnected. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, here's this lofty ideal, but like, okay, what's the bottom line? Do you go to heaven or hell after you die? Right. So the horizon of of the of the feedback of whether you're doing it right or wrong is after you die. You can't know.
Right.
Right. This is why they have these silly debates of like, can you lose your salvation? I mean, that's so
Right.
downstream of so much nonsense anyway. But like,
I love that. Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking about that the other day. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But like this thing of where Christianity's become this like moralism of like doing right or wrong. And it's
Mhm.
like, no, man, it's like a way of being, and the goal is never to not do the wrong thing. The question is not, are you doing the wrong thing or not? It's like, are you doing the very best possible thing?
Right.
Because
Right.
everything else, it's like this, it always bothered me. Like one of the ideas in Christianity that bothered me when I was younger was like the um for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and like
Mhm.
all my good works were as filthy rags and all that stuff. And I'm like, how does that make sense? Because
Right.
supposedly like if I'm following the 10 commandments, I'm like in the good here, or at least the feedback I get from my real life is if I obey the rules, people think I'm doing well.
Right.
And so I'm like, then how does that make sense? Well, it's like, because sin was like this big heavy thing instead of just literally like a descriptor. Like sin is
Yeah.
just like a descriptor. It's like, did you do the best thing? No, okay, everything else was sin. It's just like
Right.
you can do what is perceived as the most wonderfully moral act in the world and be totally in the wrong,
Hmm.
because you're predicating on some means justifies the end, or end justifies the means, utilitarianism or something. And it
Hmm.
and you just don't know. And so it's like,
Hmm.
yes, all that to say, like that notion was one of the huge things that made Christianity so difficult. Was there was never an answer for why something
Hmm.
was a certain way. There was just this appeal to just like, oh, God said so, the Bible said so. It's just like this magical thing of like,
Right. And like the thing is, if you're someone, if you want to live a very simple life and just like go by what you were taught as a kid because you're comfortable there, like that's fine. And that's a lot of the people at Biola. It's like you will have sex with one person, you will like very rarely swear, you won't take risks, you're gonna just like low key sort of a, like hobbits, you know. I always thought of like Biola as like the Shire, you know. It's like this quiet, it is, it's like this quiet little like doo, 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 you know what I mean?
yeah,
But
yeah.
for
At least it
people
used to be.
like
I don't know
us,
if it is anymore, but
yeah, I don't. I was there recently, actually. I did a little
oh,
shoot
really?
on top of the parking structure. I saw a few of the faces. They look same Biolans, but I don't know. Maybe I haven't
Interesting.
been invited back to at any events. So yeah. But no, I agree with that. I was gonna say something else too, but I'm sure I'll think of it in a minute.
Well, so here's another thing that I wanted to pick up on from what you had said earlier, was like there were these two like versions of Christianity that you saw, right?
Mhm.
One where it was like, oh, we are in charge of everything, and so we have to know what's right or wrong. That's like the
Mhm.
legalism. And this
Mhm.
also scales to like broadly into culture with all the people who like, I think you see this especially kind of in the more progressive like space, where it's like, if we just got everything right, if we did this, like we could make the world what we, it's the utopic thing, right?
Yeah.
And then on the other side you have this like, oh, everything's gonna be fine, right? Like
Mhm.
we're not in control at all, like
Mhm.
all this is determined, or and that's kind of blends in with, oh, those are kind of connected in a way, but I'll leave them alone. I won't tie in as many sides here, but like it's the naivety of that other side, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, those are two kind of broad ways of approaching reality, but they're both wrong.
Right.
Like they're both deeply wrong in a way.
Right. And the thing is, like, if you like, whenever you go at an extreme, you're often wrong, you know? Like the answer is almost always gray, almost always. And I do believe there is like one pointed truth. I do believe that. I just don't think any of the religions have like gotten there yet. And so why I love having conversations like this is because like you come from all these different viewpoints, and I see this as like a collective experience where we're all on the journey together, like discovering truth, you know? And so when you go at when you hold fast to your extreme point and you don't let loose and just, you know, let other thoughts in, let other viewpoints in, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're doing everyone else who's listening to you a disservice, because you're not right. The person you're talking to isn't 100% right either. It's we're all trying to figure this out. You weren't there at the beginning of creation. No one was. We can read all the prophecies under the sun, but no one was there, and we're not going to get the full picture till it's all over.
Yes, exactly. And I would say, so I mean, the name of my channel is Climbing on Mount Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be like one of the ways I would talk about, like, there's Mount Sophia is a symbol that goes almost everywhere you want it to. Like it's behind you everywhere almost. But one of the ways I think of it is like, you know, the collective human knowledge, right? And one of the things, and you kind of have two options, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and this gets mixed up a little bit with like the non-player character versus the real player kind of metaphor, where like if you're kind of a non-player character, or just someone who just like hunkers down and holds a position, it's like, okay, I understand why people do that, because they usually do it for things that are good ideas, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are really holding down, like, I don't say Martin Luther's ideas, right? Like there's a bunch of people who are like rallied around, they're like, we're standing on this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a bunch of people on so many different ones. But it's like, regardless of how good that idea was, and it may have been amazing, like the point is never to hold it. The point is to move on from there, right? If you see the idea, great, but stop like being the guy who's like, this is the idea, and be like, cool, that's a nice one. That looks interesting, but it's over here, and it relates to this one over here, and it relates to because you understand that none of the ideas, none of the ways of talking about the world or reality are the thing in itself.
Right.
They're all reference points.
Yeah. It's the stuff that's like, it's the energy behind the veil of everything, you know? And going back to what you were talking about with like, you can be doing something, you can be doing something great, a great act of a work or act or whatever. But like, if your heart isn't in the right place there, you're not really doing, you're sinning, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, when I look at stuff like that, like, what is the intent? You know, I think more people have sinful intentions more so than they do like sinful actions. For example, like, I'm a person, I have premarital sex. Okay. There you go, Biola. Like, I've been doing that for a very, very long time. And there were times in my life where I did that for validation purposes. And that was sinful, because when you're trying to have sex with someone for validation purposes, when you're leading an interaction on because it makes you feel good and it strokes your ego and all that, you're hurting the other person, you're hurting yourself. That's bad. But if you're healthy, which I believe I'm healthy now, like all of my previous, like recent encounters, they've been, I really like this person. I don't want to get married. I don't think I want to be in a long-term relationship. I'm going to be honest about what I want here. And I'm going to enjoy this experience with this person, give life to the person, and shoot as straight as I can, and just enjoy this experience, you know? I think that's completely different. But it often is the case where like people get like, it is often the case that people who have like a lot of sex, you know, they're trying to validate themselves in some way. But I think it's just much more about the intent of your heart. And that's why Jesus came in, because the Jewish law is strict. There's a lot of things you need to do to like follow that specific path. I think their ideals are admirable though, because it's like we can make the world better. You know, we're not waiting for a Messiah to come save us. Like, our Messiah will come when the world is like, you know, fixed itself essentially. But you need that element of, I don't know if it's grace or like, it might be grace, but you need that element inside you that feels like you can do better. You know what I mean? Or like you're okay the way you're at. You're not going to perish if you don't do the absolute best thing. And it's weird too. Like if you shit talk yourself, you don't want to do the right things. And that's what a lot of Christianity is. It's like people shit talking you for doing the wrong things. That makes people want to do worse. You know, when you feel whole and healthy and happy with yourself, that energy transfers into other people. And the happier, the more you love yourself. And I hate saying self-love because I see all these people, it seems so narcissistic. And a lot of people who preach it, I believe, are narcissistic and are doing it for the wrong reasons. But genuine self-love is just peace, you know? When you're at peace and you're around people, they feel the love that you have for yourself, that Jesus has for you, that divine consciousness has for you, that all the angels and archangels and vibes, like they feel that too.
And one thing I would just add on to that, and tell me if this is helpful or not, but it's like it's an equivocation on the word love, right? And to some degree on the self, like what does the self mean to you, right? That's a huge question. But also like there, self-love in a kind of a narcissistic way is like the Greek notion of eros, right? Where it's like you're having like a weird desire for yourself, or a weird like admiration for yourself. The flip side, which is what I think the positive self-love is agape, right? Which is kind of the fundamental Christian notion, I would argue, which is this like this grace. I think what grace is accepting agape. Like when God sends me agape, I receive agape as grace. Grace to me is the receipt, if you will, of agape. And what agape really is attention paid to another in such a way that is ambivalent as to what they actually choose to do with that attention. It's me loving you fully for just that you are, absolutely independent of what you choose to do with that. And like when I love myself that way, there's an interesting thing that happens, because there's two versions of yourself always, right? There's the self that you perceive yourself to be, and there's the self you know who you could be, right? The aspirational self. And usually, and especially in the Christian world, we use the vision of the aspirational self to judge the version of the real self, or the existential self would be what I would say, like how I actually feel. Right. And how it's supposed to be is flipped around. How it's supposed to be is that the aspirational self is like kindly showing agape to and calling to the existential self. Yeah. And from the viewpoint of the existential self, which is where I'm stuck most of the time in my life, is like it's not feeling judgment from that other side. It's oh, look what I can become. And that version of myself, which does really exist. Like, this is the weird thing, is like that version of yourself does really exist. And when you talk, maybe we can get into like higher levels of consciousness and stuff, but like when you get into a higher level of consciousness, you're playing as that version of yourself. Right? And it's like when I'm playing as that version of myself, I have no judgment for the other version of myself. I look at them with compassion and love. It's just like when I'm on this side and I'm in my smallness and like feel how much I'm not who I could be, I'm like judging myself, and that's the reason I'm there.
Exactly. And that duality, that's something they instill in every Christian child. It's like good and evil, it's like there's this like stark duality, which is why I got much more spiritual enlightenment from a lot of the Eastern religions and like the Eastern spiritual paths, because if you look at the yin and the yang, it has everything. That, to me, that's the human experience. It's like there's positive with a bit of negative in there, negative with a bit of positive. That's part of your journey. So if you were an awful person for the first 30 years of your life, and you turn it around and you become a better person for like the next 30 years or whatever, like that's part of your journey. And it's not something to shame yourself about. You look at it and you say, okay, like that's like if you paint, let me use this analogy, a painting, for example, okay, color. When you look at watercolor without a lot of contrast, it's very light. There's not a whole lot of depth there. It's washed, but if you're using blacks and charcoals in darker, bolder colors with more darkness in them, the colors are more vivid, they stand out, they pop. And so if you look at your life the way you look at a painting, those shadows and those edges, they made it richer, you know? And that's what the message should be. It's like your flaws make you richer, and your flaws can also be your strengths depending on your health and how you use them. Like speaking ability could be a strength or a weakness. Analytical thought, logic and reasoning, being in your head about things. Dude, that's a big one, because you're always thinking about things and you have an active mind. That's power. You have a lot of RAM in your brain. But if you're unhealthy, you're going to get depressed with those thoughts. If you're healthy, you're going to do good things with them. So it's all on a spectrum. It's an experience. I don't like this good versus evil duality, which makes me wonder, like, you know, like why if you say you're a Christian, you're saying that no other God exists. It's just Jesus. He died for us because he had to make the ultimate sacrifice, allowing us to communicate with the higher power. But like, why did he have to die? You know, I was Googling that like earlier this week, and I'm doing a chat GP with my AI trying to figure it out too. But it's like, I'm trying to get to the bottom of like, what specifically why did there need to be a death for that to happen? You know?
Yeah. Okay. Wow. There's like so many.
That's a lot.
Like,
yeah.
No. Like, I guess I'm trying to. Oh man, there's so many different things I could pick up on there, because, like, okay, first of all, like, a lot of our journey has been like very similar. Like that the resonances are strong across up and down there. And especially the notion of good versus evil. Because the moment that things like there's been incremental steps on my journey, right? As with everyone, where it's like I kind of broke open a little bit and it was like, oh, okay, I can see a lot more now, right? Or like I processed some trauma internally and it's like, oh, I can see a little bit more now, and so on and so forth. But there was a point at which I had like kind of a quantum leap, and it was the point at which like the notion of the knowledge of good and evil and what it meant, like what the notion of original sin is really about. Like when that clicked for me, it was interesting. The response that I had was to think, oh my God, this is what Jesus meant when he said you must be born again. Because in order to reset this, like if you actually reset this thing, you reset this thing and you become like, you can call it enlightened, you can call it Christ consciousness, you can call it whatever word, non-duality thing you want to call it. It's actually not just non-duality. It's like non-duality in duality. It's like the coming together of the particular in the whole. But like, it's when you flip that back, like when you flip that thing, and it's like a real thing in your cognition, you go backwards. But like,
yeah,
that, you know, that notion of are you interested if I pick up at the why did Jesus have to come and die part?
Yeah. Let's keep going with this, because I have so many thoughts, and I've been thinking about this all week. So yes, 100%.
Okay. Because this we're kind of moving off your story. I'm sensing us transitioning off your story, which
let's not talk
totally
about
fine,
me.
but
Let's talk about the greater things. Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to be inconsiderate by any means.
No.
So this is one of the things that has been really interesting about my journey, and this is why I am kind of in the position I am, which I'm not sure what it is all the time, but it seems that no matter where I go, Christianity is always behind me. Really, Christ is always behind me, right? And because see, like this term Christianity that's something I'm working on somewhat on the side. It's like I'm trying to pull at that term, because it's like people use that term and it means both like Saint Maximus the Confessor and like Joel Osteen, and it's like no, those are totally different things.
Right.
Those are fundamental opposites almost. And so it's like, so that just term is a problem. So I'll say Christ was always behind me, and it was like, and so I still remain in this space where like I would almost characterize my journey as this like wrestling with this notion fundamentally, this notion of what did it mean for Christ to be God, and what does that mean for me? Like you could probably boil all of my like cognitive journey, or yeah, down to that question.
Yeah.
Because it's like, when people talk about this notion, so the first thing is like, when people talk about this notion of God, there's a way in which it is always analogous, whatever their conceptualization of God is. Right? It's never God, actually, right? Because God is just a placeholder word that we use for like the place at which the pinnacle of our ability to comprehend reality disappears into nothingness.
Right.
That's what we mean when we say the word God.
Yeah, that was beautifully said too. Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, for some people they think that's a person. For some people they think it's just like energy. But like, whatever it is, it's the point where your words disappear because you're trying to refer to just like the ground of being as such. And so, but it always seems to me that the level to which people are able to go with that idea is like the opposite side of the level of depth to which they're able to go to understand themselves.
Yeah.
Like, it's this reverse mirror, right? Like, if I understand God as being like a judgmental old man in the sky, that's about the level to which I'm able to go with myself, where I'm just kind of like judgmental of my own like thing.
Dude, that is brilliant and very, very true. And so, like, yeah. And material. This is interesting because I spent some time in a romantic, I guess, fling with someone who I believe is a sociopath.
Okay.
And those people have a real issue with empathy. Okay. And empathy is like your connection to other people. That's your connection to other people. You know, that's like a life force. That's a spiritual thing. You know what I mean? But, and you see it in every single sociopath, like it's not, it's an inability to like bring that higher consciousness in you. And the acts you do are all bad because without the higher consciousness flooding through you, you will always devolve into like a material worm creature. You know what I mean? It's like, so you need that higher thing coming into you. I've felt Christ behind me my entire life also, but that's just what I used to call it, you know. In Buddhism, what is it? I forget. Siddhartha Gautama, I think. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Siddhartha Gautama.
Yeah, that was like the Buddha we all know and recognize as Buddha. But in their teachings, they say there were Buddhas before that. There have been Buddhas after that. It's a state of consciousness one can achieve based on experience.
And depending on the flavor, like we all are Buddha.
Right. Yeah. And so I have come to think of Christ more like that because I'm uncomfortable with the concept of like, there was this one man who embodied all of the God consciousness, all the cosmic consciousness. He was the one and only person in the entire world who has ever done that and will ever do that. And nothing gets good again till he comes back. But our call as Christians is to live the life he lived. So what? We're trying to reach an unattainable goal. Okay, we're trying to reach an unattainable goal, which means we need grace. Yes, but then why do I need to why can't I just accept the grace of like the divine instead of like, yes, he died for me. He's the one person that did it. Jesus, that man. You know what I mean? So why does it all come back to the crucifixion?
So you can think of it this way in terms of like in a almost like a metaphorical sense. Like, imagine you have like the infinite up here and the finite down here, right? Like,
yeah.
Because you depend on a dualistic world to make this kind of Christianity, right? You have to have heaven over here and earth over here, right? And it's like God's up here and he like created the earth down here and we're down here and we're all individuals, right? And there was some kind of separation, like we're cut off somehow, like completely until Jesus comes. And in the representation that you're talking about, it's like Jesus becomes like a straw between, and the goal is always to get to heaven, right? The goal is to get to heaven. And so it's like all of the individuals have to fit like up through the straw. And it's like it's almost like you can picture almost like, have you seen that movie Home, where there's like Home? It's like a cartoon movie. It doesn't matter. There's aliens, and they have like these like suction tubes, and they go around, and they're like right? And it's like and it's like that's the kind of level that you're talking about Jesus redeeming the world, right? It's like he died individually for my sins, and then when I die, I get to go to heaven, right? Because I've done this arbitrary thing where I just said like, yes, I believe this, and I don't know what that means, right? It's just some kind of like intellectual assent that I say, or like I go and I say this prayer and I do this baptism, and like somehow it's supposed to mean something because there's a Bible verse that says it means something, but like nobody knows what it means, but like it's supposed to work. And then like, because I know it's going to work, I can be okay with the fact that my life is miserable, and I spend a lot of time working to buy a lot of stuff that I don't care about and I don't even like, and I certainly don't need, and feel isolated. And it's like, okay, that's what Christianity is, right?
Right.
So
and that ties right into like the tree of life too, because if you look at the tree of life, there's 72 branches, there's 72 roots. And we are, as humans, like we're the tree, but Jesus, from the Christian perspective, like essentially him dying on the cross was what allowed us to like the higher consciousness to flow through that trunk and come into us.
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting too. Like I do a lot of, so I've been reading recently, some darker books, some like older, like magic books. And it's so interesting because a lot of people who practice magic, it's very similar to Catholicism in a weird, like it's really, really interesting. And Catholics, they don't just pray to God or Jesus, like they, Mother Mary, there's angels they call down, and there's different like sects where like you will talk to angels and you will like bring in other vibes, and Jesus is one of those vibes. Like it's in like the magical ways, Jesus is considered a very, very high source of energy. And you have people who claim to be witches who like call upon the name of Jesus for healing because he's considered like just very, very strong vibe. But then you also have the angels, the archangels, you have like Raphael, Gabriel, you have Michael, Uriel, Metatron, Sandal. Like you do all these different things in a meditation and call those down. And there are 72 angels and there are 72 demons. And when people refer to demons, I just think of like, that's your lowest form of yourself. You know what I mean? Like, do you ever see a person who is just angry all the time? They look possessed, And to me, like possession, it's like you're possessed by like a negative trait in you that you haven't let the higher consciousness come down and heal. That's how I view that, at least. But dude, there's so many different, this is such a wide, like there's like, I love these conversations because they're always so all over the place, but they can't really be any other way. Cause like, it's everything,
Yeah. And, man, there's like the symbolism. I don't know. I don't think I've heard the like 72 trees of life thing before, but I haven't delved much into like the magic stuff. I have a couple friends that have, and I've heard similar like types of things from them. And it's really interesting because it's like, there's the version of the Christian like thing that's like, oh gosh, like magic. And it's like, okay, well, here's the question you have to ask yourself. And because this was a question that I like, this was a thing that really helped me in my journey always, was like, if I'm going to consider something, the question is, how much faith do I have that God actually is who he says he is? Right? How much faith do I have that there is actually good? Ultimately, like all things actually work together for good. Like the Bible actually says that. Okay, so are you going to feel comfortable going out and exploring places, even if they're scary, because you recognize that all truth is God's truth? It's not as if like this is a big thing for a lot of like, especially a lot of like Protestant Christians, this notion that all truth is God's truth. And it's like, just because it's not in the Bible doesn't mean it's any less true than something that's in the Bible. If it's true, it's true.
Right.
And hopefully, if you're able to not be a fool, you can like use the Bible as a reference point. Great. But like, notice how me recognizing that something else is true over here, no matter where I saw the pattern and found this particular way of looking at it.
Mhm.
Oh, all of a sudden, if I look from there back to the Bible, now I can see that like, oh, that's interesting. Now it makes a lot more sense to me, this verse in the Bible or this idea.
Yeah. And I would argue a lot of Christians don't have the faith they say they have, because if they did, they would allow other viewpoints into their mind and then like work it out. You know what I mean? Like a lot of this faith it's like it's blind faith, and it's not real. You know what I mean? It's if you were so confident that all truth is God's truth, you would listen to everyone and you would find the truth in all those things. And I really don't, and you would find the lies in all those things too, because like
Yep.
you have the mind of Christ, but if you don't, you run into issues. Therefore, there's that. But
well, there's always the fear that I'm going to fall for something, but it's like, well, if you don't have anything to defend, or if you just don't choose to defend anything, well, you're not going to start defending the bad thing, because then you're not defending anything.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to suddenly become like a Satan worshiper just because
Right.
I like,
You've heard it, you know,
like, oh my gosh, I'm going to become possessed by Satan is always the fear. And it's like, no,
Right.
you still have control. You can choose to become possessed by Satan. Sure. But like, now you're choosing it.
Right. Right. And people need to realize too, like the Bible, like that was written for a group of people several thousand years ago. They didn't know all the things we know now. They were not as evolved as we are now, you know? And so when like you are writing things to a people group of that time without the internet, without the things we have now, like it's going to be a different way of living. And when Jesus wrote, he wrote a lot of letters to the church in Corinth and some other cities, very immoral cities. Paul, yeah. Paul.
This was something that was important for me, like, and I just like want to pick up on something you did there, and maybe it was totally non-intentional, but it's something I used to do all the time. I used to like think that when I was reading anything in the Bible, it was basically Jesus saying, and I'm like, no, like, it may be a transcendent collection of books, but there's a real difference between Paul writing something and Luke writing something that Jesus said, or Matthew, you know, where there's actually a real possibility that, you know, this was somebody who spent a lot of time with Jesus. He actually heard him say these things. It's probably not verbatim everything exactly what Jesus said, but it probably gets the idea across. Versus like Paul, who never actually talked to Jesus physically. Like, he's speaking from a perspective, looking at the thing.
Right.
So anyway, sorry, that's like one of the things to put on there of like, okay, if you actually let this text open up for you, don't like make it this thing you have to stand under and hold up. Like, no, like, stand back and let it open up for you and go into it. And it's like, oh, there's a whole different thing going on here when you let it be what it is.
And a lot of the books of the Bible, they were taken out by Emperor Constantine too. So like you got like the Book of Enoch, you have the Gospel of Thomas, like a lot of these were the actual words of Jesus. And in those texts, he tells you how to live life in a more spiritual, magical way that would give you more power. That's the thing, you know? And it would make sense that like a domineering ruler would want to keep out the most important teachings of Jesus that would give you power on this earth, because that would take away from the power of the empire and his power, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the issues of how the Bible came to be are not exactly straightforward either, right?
Right.
Exactly like you're saying, right? Like there's the issue, say, for the Protestants, right? So one of the things in my journey was that one of the people closest to me in this journey is now a very devout Catholic, and I mean, I'm quite partial to traditional Christianity as well, but like in probably a lot different ways than what people think that means, right? Because I'm coming at it from a completely different side. But one of the big things was kind of this issue of like, okay, why is the Bible what it is? And then also you realize, like, when the Protestant Reformation happened, Martin Luther just threw out a few books of the Bible and said, no, these don't count. And then like the Protestants were like, oh, yeah. And it's like, whoa, hold on. We're going to say that like sola scriptura, right? Like scripture is like, by scripture alone can you know the truth. But we're going to just kind of, so Martin Luther gets to decide, right?
Right.
And the problem, and of course the problem, even deeper problem with having any set of words claim to be the truth. There's so many levels on which it's a problem, but one of them is that the truth is then dependent on what you know the words to mean.
Right.
And so it's like your use of faith earlier. This is one of the fundamental problems with modern Christianity, is the notion of faith means something like assent to propositions for which there is no evidence. And that is such a that's the opposite of faith. It's literally the opposite of faith. What faith really means is to participate in reality without a preconceived notion of what reality actually is.
Yeah.
Because you actually because you have the faith to not take yourself as the reference point of what's real. That's why faith is the way out from original sin. Because the move of original sin is to say, I know. It's to predicate reality, from my own perspective, is to predicate reality on what I think reality is. And reference everything off that. And that's right or wrong, right? Now I know what's right or wrong. And it's like, no, faith is actually not to choose to know what's right or wrong. To have faith is to say, I don't know.
Right.
And so I'm going to surrender. I'm going to open up my, my individual map of reality. I'm going to stop defending it.
And it's funny you say that, because I have never been further away from what the mind of the standard Christian I was raised to believe was Christian. I've never been further away from that mind, but I've never had more faith in divinity and the truth and the ultimate purpose. I am if heaven and hell, if all of this we're talking about is 100% true, and there's different sectors of Christianity would say different things about heaven, hell, salvation. There's some universalists who believe, Jesus died for everyone, so everyone ascends. I don't know, but there you go. Yeah. But I'm whatever the case may be, I'm completely confident that I'm fine, because I know that I believe the truth will come to me. I believe that you have we will all find the truth. It's there. And I have faith that I'm in line with the mind of Christ and the mind of God, and whatever Christ got, whatever that is, I feel good about it. And I never felt that way when I was doing the Frozen Chosen. I was anxious all the time. It was I felt and I never knew if I was going to make it or not. It's shit, what happens when I die? I know now, but whatever, it doesn't matter. It's just, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, that's so much of the whole thing, right? I think there's a lot of things that hold Christianity in chains. And part of what I'm attempting to allow to happen as a part of my life is hopefully to shed light on the paths that allow people out of those chains, while still maintaining Christianity, or what I think Christianity might actually point towards. Maybe we'll use a different word. Let's say Jesus. Let's say the tradition of Christ, or whatever. But that, that thing, okay, so I'll come at it this way. Growing up, there was always this notion that you have to go and tell people that they're sinners who are going to hell. You need to tell people,
right?
And that's how you bring the gospel. You start the gospel by telling people they're screwed fundamentally, and then you say, oh, but we have the answer for you. You're fine. Don't worry about it, right? And it's they were fine before, actually.
Right.
And that's actually biblical to say, because and it necessarily is the case, because God is horrifically unjust. And I mean, I remember these being issues growing up in the church of God is horrifically unjust if what it means to participate in God is to acknowledge a certain set of propositions to a certain historical fact, which you may or may not ever learn of,
Mm-hmm.
If that's what it takes for you not to be damned to eternal torment,
Mm-hmm.
then God is a hideous ogre.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Because most of the people will never hear even of that story, right? And that was always the call for missions, right? Like, oh, go tell the poor people who don't know. And it's like, man, what kind of God are you serving, right?
Yeah,
Because
the way you're communicating God to me is not a God I want to serve. You know what I mean? And so many people
totally.
hate the concept of a God because they don't know, they've never had the correct explanation given to them. Like father figure in the sky. Like, no, actually, that's not what divinity is, you know?
Yeah. Like there's a reason it gets represented that way. But if your whole notion of a father and all this stuff is totally narrowed through this like distorted and horrible lens, like, yeah, it's terrible. Like if your father looks like a deranged alcoholic, then calling God your father is not helpful.
I hated my father. Yeah, right.
Yeah. But like, this, so for me, the book that broke this open for me was That All Shall Be Saved by David Bentley Hart. David Bentley Hart is he's a theologian in kind of the Eastern Orthodox Church, but he's like kind of like one of the figures of the century probably. And his book was, among many other things, like it got me out of that whole duality, this whole after death duality. And once you get out of it, you see how much of an absolute trap the whole thing is, because it's like this idea that an act of my will, of my conscious rational mind, a choice that it makes, has infinite consequences.
Yeah.
But I also know that my rational mind is fundamentally finite. It is limited. I cannot process all the information. I am forever deceiving myself. If I think that this thing is forced to make an infinite decision, that is a fundamental anxiety from which I cannot recover.
Yeah. Right.
Because I can't, like, I'm trying to solve a problem that has infinite weight.
Yeah.
And infinite, like, it requires me to understand infinity or assent to something about infinity. But I have a finite processor.
Right.
I can never catch up.
Exactly. And like wouldn't a loving divine source know that and like understand that like these finite material flesh and blood humans will never be able to grasp what this is ever. So like what we're all supposed to believe that he's up there like, haha, you're never gonna get it. You know what I mean? It's just it's just a logical fallacy, and it makes no sense in so many different languages and in so many different ways.
Like you're just begging to create atheists, and you should. Like, people should be atheistic against that God.
Right.
Atheism, like, the atheists depend on Christianity. Like, there's this idea that atheism is a sect of Christianity, and I love that because I think it's absolutely correct. But it's like, okay, so the whole answer to the problem is that it's not a problem, right? The creation of the notion that the point of living is an exercise or a training ground or a test to see where you go after you die, which is basically that argument, is that's the whole point of life. It's wrong.
Right.
That's not like, so
no.
I don't want to I don't want to even ask the question, because I disagree with the premise that can even possibly be the reason that we are alive right now.
Right. And it's crazy because like that's what everyone talks about like it's always goes back to salvation. And it's like, just get that whole topic off the debate stage. Like it's so unimportant to me, but it carries so much weight in other people's minds because we all think we're going to die. We all are going to die, but it's the human fatalistic fear. But get it off the stage, because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about living as full as you possibly can with the divine source or whatever you're calling it. Get it off the stage. I like that, man. That's good.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I can say that, but then I'll turn around and I will affirm any Christian throws at me. Like, do I think Jesus was God? Yes. Do I think he died on the cross? Yes. Do I think he rose again? Yes. Do I think he that means that we all get to live in heaven? Yes. Do I think that means like anything? Like I will affirm all of that, but I can affirm it while still maintaining this other point, and it's not even a contradiction. They uphold each other. Because the whole reason, like, remember my metaphor earlier of like the straw, like Jesus being the straw back between. There's another, like, if you flip that upside down, what you understand is that the straw doesn't carry anybody up. The straw goes down to the very middle, like picture it as a sphere, right? And the outside of the sphere is like the infinity and God and everything, right?
Yeah.
And then like we're little particulars down at various stages of hell, like closer to the depths of abyss of the center of the sphere where nothing becomes nothing that way. And it's like Jesus is like a point starting on the outside, going all the way across and all the way down to the very center to literally nothing, but taking agape love all the way there. And then basically the whole thing explodes back so that it all fills up. Now, whether or not you realize that it's filled up, that's what it means to be saved.
Right. Okay.
To be saved means to wake up in your life right now and realize that this is all real. It's all okay. And you actually are participating in this crazy thing where God became man so that man could become God.
Yeah. And that's paralleling so many other spiritual paths also. It's just like the awareness, it's just like the awareness of what this is, not about like declaring someone personally as your Lord and Savior, but just the awareness. And I think you said it very, very well. I completely agree. And so as a universalist then, so what, because in every spiritual walk, there's like the wheel of samsara in Hindu, there's I think Buddhism, it's also like reincarnation. You'll keep having to do it over and over again till you learn how to alleviate your suffering by getting rid of your material goods and all that. Or I don't know too much about Buddhism.
Got to work out all the karma.
Yeah, work out all the karma. Yeah. But then there's universalist Christians. So like what happens to the people who don't have that awareness throughout their life then?
So let me explain what I mean by universalist, and then this may make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
I'm a universalist in the sense of that I think all of creation is redeemed.
Okay.
I'm not a universalist in a sense that I think everyone goes to another place called heaven after we die. So I don't know what happens after we die, and I refuse to make any real claim about that. I think all of the models are really interesting, and I think they all are helpful in different ways if used correctly, right? Like there's ways in which when I think about like the wheel of samsara, and I think about the how many incarnations do you get? And Buddha says, well, imagine basically Mount Everest, and a dove flies across it every 100 years with a cotton thread in its mouth and brushes the mountain. As long as it takes the dove to as many passes as it takes the dove to wear away the mountain, that's how many lives you do. and it's like, hey, there's something really helpful about that too.
Yeah.
And so on the it's in some ways it's like the question of like how meaningful is my decision, right? Because on the Christian side, it's basically like your decision means everything, and this life means everything hangs on this, right? And on the Buddhist side, it's like literally like, man, you've got so many tries at this you can't even imagine, so chill out.
Right.
It's like, and we're back to that original, like, which side of the ditch are you in? Well, probably somewhere in the middle, because the point is not what happens after you die. The point is, where are you now? So that's what I mean by universalist.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. And there's and I think about this quite a bit too. There are so many planets and so many galaxies and solar systems. And it's like, and if you look at star formulations and constellations, I saw these beautiful pictures the other day, like look like a monarch butterfly in the cosmos, just out of planets. Like I saw a crystal clear eyeball that was like out of planets when you pull it back that far, you know?
Yeah.
So if you think of time more as a circle as opposed to a linear third dimensional thing, you can kind of start putting that together in your mind and thinking it through. It's like, well, are we all living different, like Doctor Strange multiverse realities on all these different planets, but we don't see the other realities on the planets because those people don't see us? You know what I mean? It's like, and that's where people start talking about, are we living in a simulation? You know, there's there's something to that. And I follow astrology pretty closely. I've probably I've done more research in like astrology and magic than I have like Buddhism and Hindu. I started doing that recently, but more so the astrological thing. It's crazy accurate in a lot of situations, you know, but it's not. And a lot of astrology was Emperor Constantine didn't like that either. And a lot of people didn't like astrology because it was seen as that like a cosmic blueprint that would take away the free will of that the Christian God was giving people. It's like, here's the blueprint of what I'm going to do. But no, like if you really learn astrology, it's like learning yourself, you know, you learn your demons so you have a better understanding of like your flaws and your strengths and your weaknesses, you know. But it's very, very accurate, a lot of astrology, and they have prophecies in astrology that are very similar to some of the Christian Judeo prophecies also. And it's just all connected, but the Christianity thing always comes back to the Christ. And that's like the crux of what I'm wrestling with the most at the moment. Is it like, is the Christ the one source, or was Christ just another Buddha, you know? And so I'm consuming everything I can, trying to get to the bottom of that, because that's the crux of, I guess, what I'm wrestling with.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, you know, the thing that so like, if you want me to push that a little further, because this is exactly where
please do.
Because like this is, again, like this resonates so much because this is the same, like very similar kind of journey that you and I've been on. And where I go from this place is the question of, well, why, right? What's happening at which level? Because it's all symbolism, right? And it's all like, the problem with astrology for a lot of people is, well, it's not measurable. It's not tied to, you know, it's not tied in closely enough to my real life experience for a lot of people, right? Because, you know, we're so obsessed with measuring things and all this stuff. Or like, you know, did it historically happen exactly this way? And it's like, it's too abstract. I can't deal with it. It makes me uncomfortable. But then you go to the flip side and you go to, say, like a hard science, right? You go like way into chemistry or whatever, and it's like, okay, that's too close. Like it's too small. It's too small. Like I can't understand the story at that level. It's too like, it's too mechanical and you know. And so it's like, okay, way out here and way down here. Okay, but I'm kind of weirdly, like, I'm not my narrative. Like that was something that I thought of when you were talking earlier. Like one of the huge flips that happens to get people out of kind of get yourself out of the ego spaces, to realize that you are not your narrative. Your narrative is happening, but you are not your narrative. And that relates to time being a circle, right? Like your narrative is like the through line, but the time is actually going like this around it.
Right.
But like the thing about the Jesus story is it's like a point of access to all these different levels for you as a person. Right? So it's like, okay, because one of the things, oh gosh, there's so many.
It's the human connection.
Am I making sense?
Yes, you are. And it makes sense because like, even like going back to the older teachings as like a child, it's like God put flesh and blood on to like, that's how humans communicate. We see other humans, we talk to other humans. So he did that to connect to us better. And him being here and then dying, that allowed us to do the same thing. So I completely get that. Yeah.
And it's like with every other tradition, even like Buddhism and Taoism and a lot of these other, when you go into, say, the philosophical understandings that they have, right, of this is how reality works and this is man's place in it, I don't think there's often a satisfying way that the one, right, the place where everything just kind of comes together actually becomes the many. Right?
Mhm.
It's like that is the claim, but there's not really a point in history that they can say like this is where it happened.
Right.
Like aside from just like creation and the end. But
Mhm.
then you have the problem of like, well, how much free will really is there? And like when we sin, are we actually like leaving? I think of like I think of evil as being like negative space
Mhm.
created in the painting
Yes.
because of a lack of proper attention.
Right.
Right.
And I
Like,
think evil is just essentially like that's what humans will devolve to without that God connection. You know, I don't like I don't know if I believe in like supernaturally uh produced, I guess, demons or like bad energy in that way. I think that like comes from humanity at its worst, you know? I think the real demons are the people so disconnected to the higher source that they divulge to their lower selves all the time. And when you go to the tree of life, those 72 roots, it's like like every depression has a genius, you know what I mean? So they're all connected in that way. So that's how I see, I guess, evil.
mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely like, so one of the ideas in like the Christian tradition is that evil is the privation of the good,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is one of the things that's interesting about the Christian tradition. You start diving into like the old church fathers and the philosophies that they have, and it's like way more interesting than anything you ever got in evangelical Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, you know, that idea is that there's like, so evil doesn't actually exist as a thing. Evil only exists as a distortion,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the distortion is dependent on the thing to exist in the first place,
Right.
right? And so it's like, okay, things just exist, right? Like take for example my life, because I think evil has to have human or agency behind it. If it's like a non-agentic bad thing happening, that's a tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something bad that happens because it was caused by an agent, then it's like, okay, now that's evil. If it's
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, okay, so if I just take my life and like my potential actions, my potential being in the world, and that's like a whole space. It's like if I do good, that whole space gets filled up with beauty.
Mm-hmm.
But when I sin, like each pixel on the picture is like a moment in time, and my attention, the way my attention engages that space, produces the result. and
Right.
and sin is literally a way in which like I obstruct it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then the result has some evil in it. It's somewhat tainted. And so if I continually do like sin and distort my attention, this
Mm-hmm.
time period of my life actually gets filled up with darkness. And that
Right.
distortion is evil. And because that's like connected to yours and to everyone else's, it pulls
Mm-hmm.
on them. And therefore, like as you scale up, say like levels of microcosm to macrocosm,
Mm-hmm.
like this distortion builds. And so you have some people who like had a lot of like they channeled a lot of evil. Like, you know, Hitler is the easiest example, right? He
Yeah.
channeled a lot of people and he pulled a lot of people around him into it. And you get this huge like darkness that
Yeah.
happens. But
Yeah.
like all of that is dependent upon the 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 being that they were given. And the only thing that can give being in that way is agape. That might be a little bit too much to just throw on the end there, but
I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Are
so
you
that's okay.
are you a Lord of the Rings fan?
Yes, I love Lord of the Rings.
Because when you're talking about distortions, I kept thinking like, yeah, you wouldn't have orcs without elves, you know, like that was it was a distortion. And what I think Tolkien was so brilliant is even like the creation of all of Middle Earth. You know, you had like the Alutar, I don't know all
Iluvatar.
Luvatar,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Iluvatar. Yeah.
and then who was responsible for singing all the world into being. Then you had the
Yes.
Dark Lord Morgoth, who wanted to sing his own song. He was like,
Yes.
I'm going to sing my own song. And instead of harmonizing with the master song, it distorted it, and it created all these evil things, which is why, and I don't base my life philosophy around Tolkien, but I see the parallel there. And I think as soon as you let like your human ego pride get in the way of that flow, and you're talking about flow too, like just like being, your attention is there, like you're in the moment, like when you're letting your egoic pride get in the way of that, that opens you up for a lot of distortion.
Yeah. Yes. No, that's exactly the thing. Yes. Yes. And I agree with you. Like, man, Tolkien, and Lord of the Rings just as such was so helpful because,
Yeah.
the way I think of it in my cognition, it's always a matter of how many things how many frames can overlay to help me to see through whatever idea or issue that I'm grappling with. And like, man, the Lord of the Rings lenses, if you might call them that, symbolically allow you to see through so many things. And that notion of like even just the notion of seeing into being what is wonderful, because waveforms and vibrations and the kinds of things that are still so mysterious about music, and how like music is, to start to understand how the brain really works and everything with music is so powerful.
Music's like the highest art form. Like, I'm a filmmaker, but I will always say music is the highest art form. And if you go back to the beginning of the world, and like God and the devil and all of that, and that duality, it was like you had Lucifer, the worship leader or the singer, the in charge of all the music. He's the one that got prideful and wanted to go against what the higher power wanted to do. And it's so interesting. Music is it's the thing that can heal people the most. But like, but the people who, the best musicians and the most famous, I like anyone in that space, like they're often very unhealthy, because a lot of evil comes with that. There's a lot of pride, you're up on stage, you're performing, you're like, you get full of yourself, and music's just one of those things. But no, sorry, that's a tangent. But music, yes.
No, that's a good tangent to go on, even because like one of the things I would say is like, people are always religious, right? People will act out religious, a religious kind of, life. And in a modern world where more than ever before, people don't know where to go with that. Because there's even a lot of people that, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious. It's like, no, there's still a religious piece that it has ritual and connection, and it's like, that's part of you, and you will act it out. And if you don't do it intentionally, you will do it in ways that are really unhealthy. But one of the most transcendent ways that even when it's unhealthy, it still like weirdly works, is music. People go to, concerts where it might even be like straightforwardly like espousing some kind of evil, right? But it still like works in giving that part of connectedness. And I mean, if you watch a concert, it's a very worshipful event, right? Like, people,
it's spiritual. There's energy there, man.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, now, but there's a big difference between going to, like, in terms of the type of, say, vibe you will feel when you go to like a really transcendent orchestra concert and you're actually vibing with it. Like, that's like oh my gosh, like it'll just well your soul up within you.
Elevates your whole state. Like, you are just,
yeah. Or you can go to some like heavy rap, like weird, who knows what, and maybe you're really into that, but like, it's very coarse, and it's also often very energized with kind of like an anger and like and it's like, it's still working to connect you and bind you together, but like, what is it manifesting in you because of that?
Right. And interesting you say rituals too, because like a lot of these, Catholicism is full of different rituals, and people who don't want to be there don't want to do the rituals, obviously. But if you look at it from like a guided meditation perspective, like you're training your brain to shut out the noise of the world, focus on moving the candle, focus on the statue, focus moving up and down the altar. Like, regardless of what you believe about the supernatural, you're doing a mind exercise. Like, you're training your mind, and just directing attention, you will be so much more powerful in your everyday life if you can do that by yourself in your own head. Like, I meditate in the morning, 30 minutes every day. I try to do it again at night. I had one of the best meditations I've ever had, maybe about like 3-4 hours ago. Like, I do it consistently because I love to do it. Like, I feel more high when I meditate now and with the breath work than I do from smoking weed and then going for like a really, really long run, because like there's something about like ritual, but it's not ritual for the sake of like check off the boxes. It's like, think about it, put your whole into it. And all these religions, they're telling, go meditate. All these religions are saying, go meditate. We've been trying to get you to do that. There's different ways to do it, but you're training your mind nonetheless.
Yeah. But the huge difference is it a means to an end?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it actually like for you, like when you're, and thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. It's like when you're in it and you're doing it because you're taking it seriously. You're really in it, and you're authentic about it. And there's no sense of like, I'm trying to gain something. Like, I don't care if anybody ever knows about this. I'm not doing this for brownie points. I'm not doing this because I feel guilty if I don't. There's no motivation except I actually believe this is the best thing for me.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you engage something that's a real ritual, because there's real rituals and there's BS rituals. But like when you engage something that's real healthy and like something that really orients you upward in that way, like it has to work. How could it not?
Right. And the thing is, it's as simple as like, if you do a really good meditation, you'll know it works. It's just getting your ass out of bed to like do it. Like, I meditate because I love meditating. It makes me feel so much better. My life gets better every day because of it. Like, I don't skip my runs. Like, I maybe will skip a run like 2 days in a row at the most if I've been on set like for 12, 14, 15 hours, whatever.
Sure.
But like, I don't skip that because it makes me feel good. And like, if you really do the breath work and you take the meditation seriously, of course, it's that initial, I don't want to do this, you get really anxious at first because your mind, you're thinking about everything. But when you really start to do it, you'll love it. And I would encourage everyone, just start doing that, not because you have to, but because like you're going to love it. It's so much fun.
Yeah. And it will like, okay. So what was your meditation journey like? I'm curious. How long have you been meditating? Is there a particular tradition or it's something that you've been engaged with?
Yeah. So what I like to do, I do a lot of I start doing guided meditation, whether it's out of a book I read or a podcast or an app or something like that. I learn the guided meditation and I listen to it. Once I have it memorized, I'll put on binaural beats, and then like the different, H52, HC. And then now that I've memorized the guided meditation, I'll do that in my head, and I'll do it back to back a few different times. I do this one guided meditation. It's channeling egregores, also known as like archangels, but that's a particular channeling of that. I do that one often. I do a really good chakra unblocking Eastern meditation. I've memorized that one also. So I try to keep it fresh too. That's something like if you do the same meditation over and over and over again, that's great. But I'm the type of person too, like I want to experience new things. So I'd encourage everyone, find some guided meditations you like, learn them, memorize them, then just go to town in your mind by yourself with it and have fun, then you can change them. Then that's the thing, like you can start changing them. It's like once you know the structure, you bring your mind to a new place. And that's when the real magic happens. Like when you do a guided meditation, but then you create in addition to that because your mind's already there. That's really rewarding. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can begin to start to use that kind of space to look at the kinds of things that actually matter to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, am I facing a deep question? Am I, am I grappling with something that is dark or like whatever? Like, no, I thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. I mean, like, meditation and meditation, contemplation, and like learning to structure, like allow the mind to fall into a structure, but also because you get out of the mind, it's like, and like letting some of those things go, and then like what a guy who I'll introduce you to some of his work probably after this, John Vervaeke, who's been a huge influence on my life. Like, he talks about it as being meditation is where you take off the glasses and like you look at them and you see where they're smudgy and you let them clean. Like, you clean them off, but it's almost more like you let them clean themselves off, really. And then contemplation is when you put the glasses back on to see if they're clear again.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's great. Yeah.
But that's awesome. So powerful.
So powerful.
Okay. We have to wrap up at some point, but we should do this again. This was fun, man.
This was a lot of fun. Dude, we're like in Joe Rogan territory. We've been going for like an hour and a half. Look at this.
Yeah. I mean, these conversations, you can talk forever.
Yeah. Awesome, dude. I'm so glad we did this. It's great to talk to you again. I haven't talked to you in years, so this is wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, this is fun. And I'll wait, so quick question about that. Your real life, that documentary that you made, is it going to end up being released, or how does that, what's the status of that?
So here I'm waiting for a little bit more of the drama to unfold, and then I'm going to submit it to festivals. So here's essentially what, like, real quick. I own the documentary outright. I started making this thinking, I was pretty passionate about the project, about him, who he was. And it became clear like halfway through that he wanted a puff piece. He didn't want an honest documentary. And I was getting to the point where I'm just like, dude, no one knows who you are. Like, unless this is a really good, edgy, thrilling film with a bunch of twists and turns, no one's going to watch the thing. No one knows who Richard Franklin is. You're just a very interesting man. Your aunt discovered DNA and you take really cool photos, but what else, So I spiced it up and I turned it into like a Nathan For You kind of like, just what is this, getting to the bottom of who this man is. The final scene of the documentary is him and I watching it together in his private cinema. And he was like appalled because every little thing he didn't like about himself, he couldn't take it.
And put a mirror on him.
Put a mirror on him. He couldn't take it. So we've gone back and forth. I
don't know if I could take it. And I'm like, yeah, who knows? Yeah. I mean,
it was a lot. So we went back and forth, had all these fights, and I can legally submit this whenever I want because I own the whole thing. He signed the dotted line, all that. We're still friends. So I'm just kind of like, I don't want him to feel bad about this. I want to kind of just let him simmer a little bit. Once he's not as dramatic, I'll release it and we'll go from there. Because I want him to get something out of it too. Like, he's a great artist and I want people to buy his art, and people will buy his art based on this film. They're just not going to think he's God's gift to the world as he views himself. Well, I mean, we're all God's gift to the world, but he views himself as like the one and only superior gift.
It's fine if you think. I love that there's this quote from Ram Dass that I love, is like, it's fine if you think you're God as long as you think everyone else is too.
Yeah. I love that. Exactly. Yeah. Ram Dass. I love Steve Jobs. We have him because of Ram Dass, probably, and Apple. Thank you.
All right, man. Well, I'm looking forward to that because I think there's a spirit in that is kind of directly counter to the ego.
Yeah.
but it's not in a kind of confrontational way, but in a very just like straightforward, like, hey, it's not as if I wish you any ill or I'm trying to paint you badly. Because that's like our culture, that it's always one or the other. And everybody's so far on either side now. It's like it's either
Right.
just like an empty puff piece, or it's like just a sleaze, like, oh, this is a terrible person. It's like, forget about that. Let's just talk about like what's really going on, and let's
Right.
emphasize the parts that are beautiful, and let's emphasize also the parts that are hard and messy, because that's how life is. And maybe if we actually are honest about those things, we can see a through line of reasonability and intelligibility in it that can like reveal to me something about myself, even though I'm certainly not a millionaire, living in the Hollywood Hills taking photos. Like,
Yeah.
I can still learn something from that documentary, but only if it's done in a way that's genuine and honest and authentic.
Right. That communicates the full spectrum of the human experience. And that's art. And that's why I didn't like the art department at Biola and a lot of the things, because it was just washed out fake art. Real art, in my opinion, it communicates the full spectrum of human emotion, experience, and people get something from that because it's honest. Yes.
All right. Well, I'll look forward to it, and I'll hopefully we'll talk again. Thank you for coming. Any final thing you want to like share or say?
I just thank you for having me. I had a great conversation. I had a great time. You were wonderful. I hope you keep doing this forever. Dude, this is fantastic. Like we need, we always need more people who are open-minded and can bridge the gap between the spiritual paths and the religions. And just, you're a good guy too. You're an awesome guy. I wish you nothing but the best. Say hello to Elise and we'll talk again soon, man.
Likewise. Well, that's very, very, very kind of you. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
And hey, what else are we going to do? Right. So thanks so much for coming. And I will say hi to Elise, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good, brother. See you soon.